All right, welcome back in on this Saturday afternoon. A much quieter day today as we recover and pick up the pieces now on what Delta has done here across the state of Louisiana. Still ongoing rains, by the way, in the southeast. We'll get to that here shortly, but we have got crews stationed far and wide. I'm meteorologist Chris Bruin here in Pecan Island. That's right on the Gulf of Mexico in extreme southern Louisiana. Then we've got meteorologist Paul Goodloe. He is in Jennings, Louisiana. And then meteorologist Mike Seidel just outside of Lafayette and Scott, Louisiana. Of course, we're going to get updates from all of them as well as the rest of our teams and kind of go through what we experienced, what the weather was like overnight during the height of the storm, and also what it looks like this morning. Is power back on? Is power off? How widespread is the damage? And for the most part, I think we fared fairly well. All things considered, remember how hard hit these communities were just a little over 40 days ago with Hurricane Laura, and there's still so much recovery yet to be done. I mean, some people just got power back in some of those most remote areas in Calcasieu and Cameron parishes just a few weeks ago. And now to have the power back out, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of customers without power between eastern Texas and here in southern Louisiana. I want to show you kind of a bird's eye view from our vantage point, but also some of the drone footage that we took earlier. The drone was taken up about 5 hours ago, and you can even see the water has receded so much so since then. So we're continuing to watch the water levels flow back out. No more issues here. And it was difficult to get around to this part of the state. There are some roads that are blocked and closed down due to some flooding. That has probably improved, but also down trees and power lines, especially secondary roads. But I know a lot of city crews and emergency crews are out in full force trying to clear up any down trees and at least get access routes into and out of these communities opened. And from above, damage is spotty. You don't have complete roofs ripped up for the most part, but you do see sheds ripped up. You do have shingles missing on some of the homes and sheds that, you know, kind of got misplaced. Here at the coast, Carl, is where we have seen some of the most significant damage, and that, of course, has to do with the surge being the biggest impact.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. And we are still watching what is left of this storm right now, still seeing a circulation showing up in Mississippi, a couple of flash flood warnings there. There is also now a severe threat. We'll begin with the core of the storm, and along with that, seeing now a flash flood warning for Lafayette, Panola, Yalobusha counties until 4:15. You see it's just non-stop rain there over the last hour or so. Then to the east of that, another flash flood warning in effect for Lee and Prentiss and Union counties, that in the Tupelo area. That going until 4:15. There's not a lot of wind right now associated with the system. Winds did actually gust to 50 miles per hour plus in western Mississippi earlier today, now down to 23 in Jackson. So wind is not going to be much of a threat going forward, but there is this severe threat, tornado watch in effect in western Georgia and eastern Alabama, including the Atlanta metro area. That's going until 8 o'clock tonight. So there could be some damaging wind and a few tornadoes within this area. As you look at the satellite and radar combined, there's still a lot of cloud cover in Atlanta. So that's going to help out. But where we do see some clearing and it gets a little bit warmer, that is going to increase that threat for tornadoes later this afternoon and early this evening. We're seeing a little more sunshine in southeast Alabama and also in southwest Georgia. And in fact, when we look at the velocity data, if you look very closely, you can see a couple of areas. One is right in there, and then another one popping out right there, and then another one off to the east of that right in there. A few spots where there have been some rotation showing up in these thunderstorms. I think you actually could have made a case for a tornado warning on that one that was near 82. So we're definitely seeing rotation in storms right now, and that's not a surprise at all. We've got a big change in wind speed and a little bit of a change in wind direction with height going from the surface up to 5,000 feet. That wind shear adds to the tornado threat, and the instability, while not real high, has been gradually increasing across parts of Alabama and Georgia. So we're looking at a tornado threat in those areas that we discussed earlier, from Atlanta on south and westward into Columbus, Montgomery into Dothan, 3 out of 10 on the Torcon. And as we look at the model forecast, we see that we're going to find more of these storms coming into the Atlanta metro into late afternoon and early evening, and storms continuing to roll across parts of Alabama and South Georgia right through tonight. Julie, over to you.
All right, we'll be watching that. And meanwhile, meteorologist Mike Seidel is bringing us the sights and sounds from Scott, Louisiana. Mike?
About 90% of the residents here in Scott, Louisiana, just off to the west of Lafayette, woke up this morning. James here in Scott, and you're one of the lucky ones because you have power. But
Yes.
Talk about what you did as far as evacuating and about this hackberry tree.
Well, we listened to the Weather Channel, made sure, heed all the warnings. And when they say don't stay in a mobile home, you can see the result. I mean, it's just something you want to be very cautious of. But we've been here 30 years at this location. Everything's, withstood time, but I guess that's just what happens. This tree came down on some older cars that I've had restored, and seems that they actually took the brunt of the storm. But it's basically a brand new roof on the house we just put about 8 months ago from a previous storm, and the metal roof seemed to hold up a lot better than the shingles. It didn't penetrate the roof, and we're lucky for that.
And I think I hear your tree guy across the street, so he's going to come in, and
he's on standby.
And his plan is to pull this tree up?
Yeah, he's got a plan in mind. I'm kind of glad I didn't start earlier, that you guys were here, because I couldn't figure out how he'd ever get it off of the cars. But he's got a plan to actually strap it to this other tree and stand that the tree that's fallen, stand it up again, and top it out from there.
Okay, Robert and Susan James, we appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much.
your time. Glad you're not hurt. Nobody in town was hurt.
Yes, sir.
Power will get back on. We've got good weather for the cleanup in the next several days here in Scott. And once again, Delta causing more problems here than Laura did, because they had more wind, they had less rain. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel, the Weather Channel, Scott, Louisiana.
Mike, thank you. Winds gusted to 96 miles per hour in Lake Charles last night as Delta came on shore, taking out potentially thousands of trees and power poles. At this hour, more than 500,000 customers are without power in the state of Louisiana alone. People who stayed in Lake Charles describe what it was like as the second hurricane in just 6 weeks moved in.
The winds were a lot stronger, and it lasted a lot longer than I was anticipating. So just having that wind forcing the water in through all the cracks of the house, through the windows, was pretty intense. And then the rocking of the house, I wasn't expecting that. Felt kind of like a rolling earthquake, and it lasted, I want to say, hours, and I was expecting it to be maybe a short 2 to 3 hour period. It was like 4 to 6 hours.
Let's get caught up right now on what we know. Louisiana's Entergy has 7,300 employees deployed in Louisiana and 2,200 in Mississippi. The utility also asked residents to be patient as they restore power to hospitals and nursing homes first. In the meantime, keep generators outside and away from doors and windows, and nearly 24 flood-prone roads are closed in East Baton Rouge Parish at this hour. All right, we want to get the very latest now on the ground. Chris Bruin is in Pecan Island there. Chris, looks like a nice day, but I know the folks there have been through a lot in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, the last 24 hours, the last 3 months. I mean, goodness, we've gone through how many preparations and how many actually direct hits and eye walls have we gone through just this season alone. So it's nice to see the sunshine and at least a comfortable afternoon for those 500,000 customers who still don't have power right now. It's a good day to open the windows, clean up your yard debris, and try and get back to a little bit of normalcy here at the coast, but even well inland where we know a lot of trees are down and power is out for so many. I want to walk you through what happened from a standpoint that our meteorologist Stephanie Abrams can only bring you. She was in Jennings, Louisiana during the height of the storm. Here's her journey.
Yeah, Army, are you kidding me, Cantori? We're getting crushed right now with the rain and the wind ripping down the street. Visibility has dropped significantly. We're watching the power line. Shows what is happening with the wind. That is by far the strongest gust we've seen so far. I anticipate to continue to see those and perhaps some stronger ones as we go over the next hour. It's about 11 miles to our south. That's it. The weather there is coming right back up to us. Look at these gusts. We're going to be in this for about the next 30 minutes, and I anticipate, I was just looking at the radar during the commercial break, down towards Port Arthur, we've adjusted to 96 miles an hour. That weather is rotating up to us. And Port Arthur is, I should say Lake Arthur, excuse me. Lake Arthur, which is 11 miles to our south, gusting to 96 miles an hour. The weather there is rotating right up to us. There's our strongest wind gust. Now we're feeling it. I was kind of waiting for this. I knew this was going to be coming in from Lake Arthur, where they were gusting up to 96 miles an hour. I'm now at the point in the storm where the rain feels like pebbles on your face. That's how fast and how strong it is hitting any exposed skin. You can tell now, even from just last 15 minutes, things have gotten worse, and they they deteriorate pretty quickly. We can show you the trees that are swaying in the wind here, and down the street, the visibility is awful, just sheets of rain going down. We are experiencing the eye wall of Category 2 Hurricane Delta. Watch out, there's debris flying, watch out. All right, it's okay, it went down the other way. We're all right, you're all right. You just catch it out of the corner of your eye. So there is debris that is starting to fly.
Oh, wow. Taking one for the team right there. What a trooper Steph Abrams is, and the whole team behind the camera, keeping her safe and you informed on what's going on during the height of the storm, because unless someone's out there, unless you're there, which in the most cases, people aren't getting that full visual of what goes on during the heart of these storms. I want to bring in Storm Specialist Carl Parker. Carl, here in Pecan Island, our highest observed gusts that we were able to manage was 75 miles per hour. We had similar situation in Lafayette, and we even had the onshore winds, yet the winds were even higher on the west side of the circulation with the offshore winds over towards the Texas state line. Lake Charles over 90 miles per hour. Why do you think that was with this storm?
Well, I think there was probably a little bit of a gradient involved there, because we know that there was cooler and drier air that was wrapping in on the underside of the circulation. And so what that does is it increases the thermal gradient. And when there's a difference in temperature like that, that increases the speed of the wind, essentially. When you have a tighter gradient like that, that increases that wind speed. So that's what we saw on the backside of the system. You can really see that in the water vapor imagery here. We saw the system coming onshore with all of that moisture indicated with the green, but then notice the orange just off to the west. That was the dry air that was lurking, waiting to be injected into the system by the strong wind shear, which the storm met right at the coast. And then that kind of blasted in behind that. So that temperature contrast between that cooler, drier air and that very warm and very humid air, I think that alone sharpened up that gradient, and that sharpened up the winds, even though there was not a lot of thunderstorm activity on the south side, the west side of the circulation. That's generally where you find the strongest winds, where you find thunderstorms in the hurricane itself. Now, looking at the rainfall totals, they were way up there in a lot of cases. We're talking about amounts that were very, very high. I'm not sure why that took a second to come up there, but let's go back to that. And there you go. You see in these areas where we've got the red and pink there, you're talking about a foot or more of rain. So we did have very serious flash flooding last night as a result of that. And the flash flood threat is not quite over yet. We're still looking at some areas of heavy rain and flood alerts in effect. Flash flood watches, Julie, across North Mississippi and also into the Appalachians, and a couple of flash flood warnings right now across North Mississippi. Over to you.
Yeah, and now Delta will move into the southeast. It's going to be wet. It's going to be gusty in places like Nashville and Atlanta. You can see the kind of morning people here in Jackson, Mississippi woke up to, with sheets of rain, really gusty winds there as well. So now we look at where Delta is heading next, and it's heading in general off to the northeast right now, and still about a 30-mile-per-hour storm by this evening. Depression at this point. It will continue to move through the Mississippi Valley, the Tennessee Valley as well, eventually throughout the day tomorrow. So Nashville, you're one of the cities that we'll be watching for some impacts there in terms of the rainfall. Here's a look at Memphis, certainly looking at some more rain coming in. We've been getting some of that rain for you this afternoon. The gusty conditions continuing throughout the day and in through the rest of the evening as well. Things will die down for you here in Memphis, though, by the time we get in through the latter part of tonight and then into Sunday, a much better day here in Memphis. Nashville, though, tomorrow you will be feeling some of these impacts from Delta. We're looking at rain. Winds not all that impressive, 5 to 10 miles per hour, though, but that will be most of the day for your Sunday.
A woman who was young.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Looking at some new video here. Look at this. Look at that tree. Look at the size of that. This is from Rayne, Louisiana. That's just west of Lafayette, kind of right in between Lake Charles and Lafayette, not far from Jennings. And this is the scene. Some of these large old growth trees come crashing down. In some cases, they're split at the base. Other times, they're uprooted completely. Thankfully, in this case, it didn't hit any structures, but wow. Shows you the power of the winds. Also, hurricanes are known for storm surge, and that's where we've been seeing here in Pecan Island. That's where we are. We're getting you a bird's eye view of kind of the aftermath. This road, when we got here, was completely covered in water and grasses. These marsh grasses are almost like sugarcane, but not quite exactly. And you can see what the water has done. This is leftover storm surge water and rainwater. But the surge came in, and it's amazing. We've been looking at some of the street views of what this typically looks like, and essentially, it shouldn't look like a body of water out there. Usually you would have a lot of grasses. It would look like a marsh. And you can see some leftover stands of grass, but with the combination of Hurricane Laura and now Hurricane Delta combined, it has really done a number on the actual landscape and environment. And the problem is, it's not bad right now. You get almost a water view where before it didn't look like you were right on the Gulf of Mexico. But when another hurricane comes, Carl, now you're losing your protection. And so that surge then comes up even farther inland because the grasses aren't there to kind of divert it and catch it back. And we see the same thing with cypress swamps. As these things start to get destroyed, even by hurricanes, over time, if they don't get built back up again, you lose your protection, your defense barrier naturally.
Yeah, those wetlands are so important when it comes to mitigating surge. And, you know, Chris, you were talking a little bit about the wind last time we talked, and I wanted to ask you about your experience with the wind there. You know, I have been out in hurricanes. I remember one time I went out into Hurricane Brett, and I actually had a handheld anemometer, and I was getting readings in the upper 50s, and I could not believe how strong it felt. And then the highest reading I got was 79, and I thought it would have been more like, 100 miles an hour. You know, I think it's actually, wind, it's really, really easy to overestimate wind. It's really, really powerful feeling when it gets up there to hurricane force.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's in the same boat. When you hear the wind, you hear the sound, the howling sound. I mean, going in the just the elevator entrance, no way was I going to go up the elevator because you heard the wind just go through the whole building all night long. We had it in Laura, we had it here, and it sounds so much stronger than 65, 70 miles per hour. But it's just the roariness and vibration, the pressure differences. There's so many factors. But yeah, you think it's so much stronger, and you're like, whoa, that was only 70 miles per hour. That felt like 100. I totally understand, and we totally felt that way here even last night in Lafayette.
Yeah, it's amazing how even a quote unquote low grade hurricane or high end tropical storm wind can still be really, really strong. Thank you so much, Chris, and we'll talk to you again shortly. I want to show you the latest on what's going on right now. We've got a flood threat and a couple of flash flood warnings to tell you about in northern Mississippi. One of those in Lafayette, Panola, Yalobusha counties, just along 55 there. Another one just north of Tupelo. As you see, these bands not moving a whole lot. Then we're also looking at a tornado threat, tornado watch in eastern Alabama and in North Georgia, including the Atlanta metro area. That going until 8 o'clock tonight. It's been interesting in Atlanta. You look at the cloud cover here, and it's really been locked in for a lot of the day today. In fact, I think we've got a tower cam that we might be able to show you of downtown Atlanta to show you that the clouds are just hanging in there. And as long as that is the case, then it is not going to get as warm. And as long as that happens, then it's going to be harder to get the ferocity in the storms that could produce tornadoes. So let's hope that we continue to see that cloud cover. We are seeing some breaks a little farther off to the south and to the west. A little bit more in the way of breaks down into South Georgia. And then also I want you to notice this line of storms near Alexander City. This is north Montgomery. Every one of those storms are showing some level of rotation. So we are seeing little bits of rotation here. We've certainly got the ingredients in place. And as I mentioned, more sun in South Georgia and southeast Alabama. And that's where the instability is increasing a little bit. It's been limited, and in large part because of all that cloud cover that's been in place, and it's not going away that quickly. But where we are seeing more sunshine, there is going to be more potential for severe weather. So here you see the Torcon. It is 3 out of 10, and that in North Georgia as well as eastern Alabama. And looking at the model forecast, we do see some of these discrete cells making their way through central parts of Georgia, also in eastern Georgia, going into this evening. And then even into the overnight and early tomorrow morning, there may be some stronger thunderstorms in the morning in East Georgia and parts of South Carolina. And that severe threat will continue into the Carolinas right into tomorrow afternoon. We'll have more on Delta coming up in a moment.
First of all, don't go out sightseeing. It's too early. We're still engaging in search and rescue. We have power restoration crews out and about, other local elected officials and first responders and so forth. So please don't go out sightseeing. But if you must go somewhere, go to 511la.org for real-time updates on road closures and conditions.
And great advice there from the governor of Louisiana. Again, a lot of roads closed all across southern Louisiana, and some are just impassable because of downed trees and power lines. And that's what we've been seeing here, even in south central Louisiana. We're in Pecan Island, south of Lafayette. And I will say, our drive down here, we did have to navigate through some of the closures and detour around. Some of them were flooded. The flooding's improving because, again, the surge is going down, but there's still a lot of downed trees covering some of the lanes, and you're having to weave through and down power lines. We know power outages are huge, and nearly 500,000 Louisianans are without power right now. So that's something we're continuing to follow. I want to show you some of the damage that we've been seeing. We've been talking about the surge. One thing, though, if you look behind this White House, you've got what appears to have been the surge that brought up that shed. It looks like. It almost looks like a shed mixed in with something else. A smaller structure, but obviously that wasn't where it originated. You didn't put it right in the middle of the tree of the forest, but the water took it that way, and that may have been damage from Laura. It's hard to tell if what's damaged from Laura and then what is damaged here from Delta. I do see a lot of shingles down, and from what we've talked to from the locals, they did say they had this place pretty much cleaned up since Laura pushed through. So a lot of the damage that we're seeing, for the most part, is new damage, and that's from Delta and what just happened here over the last 24 hours. And then you can see the trees. There are several trees down here on the edge of the swamp and the marshland in this general vicinity. Of course, winds taking them down. I even see a boat kind of tossed in there. Hard to make out on the camera. It's kind of right between the power pole, but there is a lot of stuff. And even Carl, you know, the owner of this, he has an airboat, and he has no idea where the airboat is. He's like, if you would just remove all of this water here on the marsh, he's like, you'd be amazed at what you'd find just from debris, just kind of sitting at the bottom of the water and just covered underneath the surface.
Yeah, a lot of cleanup ahead. And Chris, if there is any good news, I noticed that the temperature nearby Abbeville is 81 right now with a dew point in the 60s. And so it's pretty comfortable out there.
Yeah, and that's such a refreshing environment for those who don't have power. Open up the windows. I know people are getting in their yard trying to clean up some debris, lawn issues, down trees. Great weather for it. And the forecast through the next several days actually looks awesome. So overnight lows in the 60s, drier and not as humid.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. And that's certainly something you can expect when you have a landfalling hurricane. At this time of the year, you've got these dueling seasons, and you can see that as plain as day here on this loop. This loop showing you where the moisture is, and you see those greener colors there. That is the moisture in the atmosphere associated with the hurricane, and then the orange color is the drier, cooler air, and that started to really get injected into the system right as it was making landfall, served to weaken the system, but also did contribute to the winds because of that difference between the warm and humid air and the cooler air. That actually tightened up the gradient, and that increased the wind speeds on the backside of that area of low pressure. But again, very comfortable across a lot of the south as that recovery continues. So the landfall was at 6 o'clock Central last night, Category 2 hurricane. That makes 4 landfalls in Louisiana, and that is tied for the record for the most landfalls in one season. The other year that happened was 2002. And for the most part, the winds were on the high tropical storm force range, sustained, but we did see gusts that were even higher than that, gusting to 96 in Lake Charles. And then we saw a terrific amount of surge as well along the coast of freshwater canal locks up to 8.3 feet. Well, Mike Seidel has the latest on the storm from Scott, Louisiana.
Hurricane Delta made landfall Friday evening along the Louisiana coast, their 4th landfall of the season, knocking out power to almost 600,000 customers. And here in Scott, about 90% of the population without power. Trees down on some homes, including this mobile home the James family have lived in for 30 years. Now, they did get a new roof in November, and it's not a shingle roof, the aluminum roof. It's in much better shape. They evacuated, which you're supposed to do when you're in a mobile home, but this hackberry tree came down and destroyed. At least one of these cars is in pretty bad shape. This is their 76 Lincoln Cartier, only 19,000 miles, but the cars can be fixed. They're okay, and the sun is out today. Well, what a storm. The strongest winds came in on the backside after the rain had ended. Peak gust here was hurricane force at 75 miles an hour. But no injuries here in Scott and no fatalities. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel, the Weather Channel in Scott, Louisiana.
Welcome.
Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Supposed to count the rings to find the age of a tree. I've counted these rings. I kind of lost count around 65 or so. So we're talking maybe at least 6.5 decades old. But this was cut from the taller part of this tree. So you can see is definitely maybe another 10, if not more, years of growth before it got to this part of the tree. So this was a huge tree, maybe, 80 years old, which is now a victim of Hurricane Delta. Let me show you what's going on here, because it wasn't just the winds. It was a combination of the winds and the heavy rain. This ground here is just saturated, or if I step too close to it, it's like a water bed, because the water is very, very high. When the grass ends, nothing but water here. So that softened the root mass here. And when the winds came in, howling in from the east with the eye wall last night, it took that tree and pushed it right across the road. In fact, it was hanging on some of the power lines here for a while till some crews knocked back down. Now this tree looks like the back of the eye wall, the back edge came through after we went through the eye. And then we had our wind shift from the west, which is coming from this direction, and knocked this tree down, which I have a little section from. But now the cleanup continues. This has been quite the year here in just Louisiana alone. This is now the 4th time we've been impacted by a named system. The most notorious so far this year was Hurricane Laura, a Category 4, which devastated Lake Charles, which, by the way, is about 45 miles to the west of us. We saw impacts here in Jennings, Louisiana, but Delta came closer. But Delta was only a Category 2 hurricane, but still substantial damage here. Power is still out across the area. And if this is what a 2 does, people here are happy they didn't have to go through a 4. That's what their neighbors to the west went to go through. But now we still have another cleanup. And what a year it's been. Delta, the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet. We went to the Greek alphabet because we exhausted the other 22 names of this year. So 26 name storm. It is our 9th hurricane. It is our 3rd major hurricane. And by the way, it is also the 10th storm now, named system, to make landfall here in the U.S. If you're with me, you can't wait till this hurricane season and this year comes to an end.
I'm with you, Paul. Hurricane Delta is certainly unwelcome in a place like Lake Charles, Louisiana. Still in the cleanup and rebuilding processes after Hurricane Laura made a direct hit. That was just 6 weeks ago. So now Delta has just added insult to injury here. More downed power lines. The trees are down as well, water damage, and it's really putting residents back to square one in many cases. Our Tevin Wooten and Justin Michaels were in Lake Charles for Delta's landfall last night. Let's take a look.
We lost power at about 5:30. That as a 75-mile-an-hour wind gust came through, and that knocked out power at least to here at this property and the neighboring property, which is the LeBaire. So I can't speak for the entire town, although I do think about 18,000 customers. And it looks like we just lost portions of power again. The rainfall has been relentless, so much so that we have broken a daily rainfall record. 7.5 inches is how much rain has fallen today. A lot of that, Steph, has actually fallen within the last, I would say, 3 or 4 hours.
Hey, I'll tell you what, right now, conditions are not great here, Mr. Mike Bettis. We know we could be in the western eye wall for quite a long time, maybe another hour, 2 hours. So as this thing continues to push off to the northeast, we still have a lot of weather to go through here in Lake Charles.
Yeah, very rough time there, and things have calmed down in that part of our country. But boy, still dealing with some gusty conditions here. This is a look at our wind gust forecast for 7 o'clock local time. Places like Memphis still gusting around 15 to 20 miles per hour. Greenville here maybe gusting up around 30, as well as Monroe, Louisiana, Jackson, Mississippi. So still a really blustery night out there for many of you as Delta continues to push off to the northeast. Things will die down by the time we get into tomorrow morning in these parts, and the rain will also die down by tomorrow, but we still have a wet night ahead here in a place like Memphis. Could still see some more rain for the next couple of hours coming your way. You've been getting that rain for most of the afternoon here as well. Nashville, it's coming your way in terms of the rain and the wind. So looking at Sunday, still dealing with some moderate winds at 5 to 10 miles per hour, but the rain continuing to fall. Maybe an inch or so is what you'll pick up. You'll get a short reprieve, but then it looks like some more storms are going to fire and head your way Monday into Tuesday, so that ground's going to be pretty saturated. Atlanta, another city we're watching, particularly tonight. We could see severe weather in the Atlanta metro area. Even a tornado watch has been issued here. We're looking at some pretty strong bands of rain coming in, pushing in throughout the remainder of this evening, starting maybe around 5, 6 o'clock. Again, a tornado not out of the question here in the Atlanta metro area. Things will calm down late tonight, and then some more scattered storms tomorrow. It doesn't look like a high severe threat, though, for you in Atlanta tomorrow. Could pick up about an inch or so of rain in Atlanta, out in Marietta and the suburbs here, all of the surrounding areas. So some pretty gusty winds coming through the Atlanta metro tonight as well. Charlotte, another city to watch in terms of the rain and the wind. We're looking at a timing of Sunday into Sunday night. Well, don't forget, you can get even more coverage of Hurricane Delta on social media. Be sure you check out Pattern, Twitter, Snapchat. It's all there.
almost unbelievable. This is real.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, tomorrow night at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
So if you're impacted by Delta, do a couple things today. Take photos of damage, write it all down on a list, and save all your receipts, and call your insurance company. If you do those 4 things, you'll be ahead of the power curve once we get a major disaster, potentially for Delta.
And that's great information there, and especially one to remember in upcoming future storms. You always want to take pictures of your property before the storm hits, and we saw people, even business owners, doing that yesterday just before the weather came in, and then afterwards you take pictures and then compare so the insurance adjusters can really get a clear idea as to what exactly happened and can give you everything that you would like to be fixed for your home. So a lot of people are going to be doing that today. Great weather to be getting outside. Boy, have things changed from now to this time yesterday when we were dealing with surge values that were really on the rise. You know, here in Pecan Island, we're about as close as you can get to the Gulf of Mexico without actually being on the Gulf of Mexico. It's about 3.5 miles to our south. There's a whole stretch of coastal communities, including Creole, Cameron, and here in Pecan Island. People, though, they don't ride the storm out here. They move to their actual homes a little farther inland. However, they do prepare. And David Johns, the owner of this school camp, tells us in his very words why preparation is key.
It's been interesting. A lot of nerve-wracking times. It's been where we would, prepare, and it would get detoured around, or it would go off somewhere else. Like saying, a lot of times we get built up for them and then they don't hit. Well, we had 2 of them that hit this year, so.
Yeah, to hit within 12 miles of each other. You know, Creole, Louisiana, that's where we had landfall, Julie. That's only about a 40-minute drive to our west, and of course a large circulation. So many people experience those eye-wall winds and hurricane-force winds from central Louisiana all the way to the Texas state line.
Yeah, 2 very different storms, but still just really too close for comfort as well, right? Thank you so much, Chris. We'll get back to Chris later on in the show. In the hours, though, after a disaster like Delta, you don't want to find out that your portable generator isn't working properly. Here's Danny Lipford with some key tips to make sure you'll get the power when you need it.
I'm Danny Lipford from Today's Homeowner. A portable generator can be a lifesaver when the power goes out after a storm, but only if it's working properly. Check your oil, fill it with fresh gas, and test run it to make sure that it's ready when you need it. When you use a portable generator, it's important to protect your family from carbon monoxide in the engine's exhaust. Carbon monoxide is invisible, odorless, and very deadly, so never run a generator inside or in a partially enclosed space. Only operate them outdoors with plenty of ventilation away from windows, doors, or crawl spaces. When it's time to refuel your generator, make sure you shut it off and let it cool down a bit before refilling the tank. Spilled fuel on a hot engine can cause a fire or explosion. Never connect a portable generator directly to your home's wiring because the voltage can backfeed onto power lines, possibly injuring utility workers or your neighbors. Instead, use heavy-duty extension cords to connect individual lights or appliances to the generator and be sure they're unplugged when you start or stop it. Also, be sure any extension cord connections are protected from rain or any standing water. Remember, the first priority in a storm situation is keeping yourself and your family nice and safe.
Absolutely, and don't take his advice lightly. Between 2005 and 2017, 900 Americans died from carbon monoxide poisoning while using portable generators. So definitely take that seriously. All right, well, we do have a cold front that is triggering some strong to severe storms in the Northeast and in through New England this afternoon. Taking a live look here at Syracuse. Holton, Maine. Both of those staying quiet for now, but things are likely to change a little later on this evening. We take a look at what's currently happening. We have a cold front that's dropping in here from Canada. It is starting to trigger some storms here in upstate New York. So we're awfully close to the border right here. But we do have a severe thunderstorm watch up in yellow, and this does go until 9 o'clock Eastern time. Does include much of Vermont and upstate New York here. So could see some pretty strong storms develop, we think, even winds in excess of maybe 60, 70 miles per hour. Starting to get things going just a little bit here, again, right along the border right now with some lightning showing up. That's another threat we'll have to deal with. But really anyone here in red looking at that possibility for the damaging winds, the heavy downpours, could see, issues with power here if we do get some of these storms, 60, 70 mile an hour winds coming through later on tonight. Timing it out for you here with our future radar, does look like things will start to bubble up even more right around dinner time and then last for the next few hours before things settle down in the late night and overnight.
Unbelievable images coming out of Louisiana. Again, enduring 24 hours. This time yesterday we were nearing the peak of the storm, especially as it was approaching landfall in Creole, Louisiana. Thanks for joining us here on the Weather Channel. Boy, have things changed, much quieter pattern. Things have cleared out, and it's actually comfortable outside as people now are assessing the damage and starting the cleanup and rebuilding process. I'm meteorologist Chris Bruin here in Pecan Island, Louisiana, as close as you can get to the shore without being in the water. We've also got teams of meteorologists scattered across the state. We've got meteorologist Paul Goodlow in Jennings, Louisiana, and also meteorologist Mike Seidel. He's outside of Lafayette and Scott, Louisiana. We're going to be hearing from them and their updates on those communities here shortly. But let's start along the coast. We know storm surge was an issue. I want to show you what the storm surge result looks like. The water is almost now gone back completely. You're always going to have water out there on the horizon because this is a low-lying wetland type environment. But what you don't see are the grasses because they've been uprooted and totally washed ashore in numerous spots up and down miles along the shore. You can see how it's just all dead now, and it's piles upon piles here that were covering the road. We had some locals and residents kind of collaborate together and put together all the machinery they had and remove all of this on their own so they could open up this road because otherwise it was impassable to get through at times. And we even have some drone footage from above, and you can see really the majority of the buildings are standing, which is good news. They didn't have the type of storm surge that we saw with Laura, but you do notice some damage. We see some roofs peeling back in small areas. Of course, sheds, we did see a few of those kind of tossed around, even on our drive down here from Lafayette. And then shingles missing and cosmetic damage. You had fences ripped open at times and a lot of large trees that even got toppled down, but they're not widespread. And even from Pecan Island where we are to Lafayette, again, you'll occasionally see it here and some damage here, but it's not everybody and it's not widespread. It's very different than what we were seeing in Lake Charles, say right after Laura came through, a very different type of storm. However, in Lafayette and in south central Louisiana, the winds were much stronger with Delta. Broader wind field, also a little bit farther track to the east, brought some of those stronger winds into Acadiana and into places like Scott and also Lafayette. And Carl, you brought up a good point. Likely with the spotty nature of the damage, we didn't have the persistent, sustained hurricane force winds. It was more gusts from time to time, and that was so true. We were out even before the worst of the core winds made it through, say a little after dinner time last night, and we went outside because before we were hearing the commotion. It was wild. It was really loud. And we're like, we got to get outside, get one more, video so we can show people what's going on. And we went outside and it was very tame. So it was very strong gusts and then they would kind of subside and then they would pick back up again. And that's kind of how it was for several several hours in the evening and overnight last night.
Yeah, and that's certainly reflective of that transition from a tropical system to a non-tropical system. And, you know, you made a really good point last hour. We were talking about the fact that the weather has been very comfortable, and that's at least a little bit of silver lining here, given that you've got 500,000 people without power in Louisiana.
Yeah, we're talking about 500,000 customers without power, and you can imagine typically after hurricanes, especially in August and September, it is brutal. It's even more humid than when the hurricane came through. That is not the case. It's refreshing mid-October air. It's dry compared to Louisiana standards. And I mean, here at the coast, we're only in the upper 70s to right around 80 degrees. And overnight tonight, it's going to be pleasant. We're talking upper 60s to low 70s. And that breeze is a north wind, so it feels very nice.
All right, at least a little bit of good news there. Chris, thank you so much. And here is the advisory from the Hurricane Center as of this morning on the system. They have issued their final advisory. We'll get a new one at 5 o'clock from the Weather Prediction Center. So there's a changing of the guard there that occurs after the storm goes inland. 35-mile-per-hour storm as of that advisory. We have not seen winds that strong in the last couple of hours. Some flash flood concerns in northern Mississippi, a couple of flash flood warnings, and there's an ongoing worry about severe weather. I'll tell you, we have not seen any warnings so far this afternoon. There you see the tornado watch in effect in eastern Alabama and North Georgia. That does include the Atlanta metro area. Going until 8 o'clock tonight, there could be a few tornadoes and some gusty wind as well. One thing that we have seen for a while now is a lot of cloud cover. I think we can show you a live view of downtown Atlanta, and this is basically how it's looked all day today. A lot of cloud cover all the way around here. We're just starting to see a little bit of thinning of the cloud, but temperatures have been in the lower 70s and middle 70s. And you notice also there's a pretty good mass of rain that is off to the west. So really the only way you're going to get enough instability to get those stronger thunderstorms that are more likely to produce tornadoes is if we get some breaks, and that happens before we see all of that rain coming in. But so far, it doesn't look like it's going that way. Although we are, as you look at the radar, seeing just a little bit of development now north and east of Atlanta. And then farther south, this is where we're seeing more sunshine into middle Georgia and the southern part of the state. And as I zoom in here, I want you to notice these cells. You see how they look a little bit like a kidney bean? They've got a little bit of an appendage on there. These are definitely rotating cells. They're just not rising to the level of producing tornadoes right yet, but they're rotating. We've seen a lot of rotation in these storms so far today, but we just haven't seen real robust storms because the instability has been limited. That is crawling up just a little bit, climbing up a little bit. And right now what we're looking at is a 3 out of 10 on the Torcon in parts of Alabama and also in Georgia. Julie, over to you.
All right, Carl, thank you for that. Meteorologist Mike Seidel bringing us the sights and sounds now from Scott, Louisiana.
About 90% of the residents here in Scott, Louisiana, just off to the west of Lafayette, woke up this morning in the dark. The power is out because of Hurricane Delta, making landfall yesterday evening. Winds gusted at the nearby Lafayette Airport to 75 miles an hour. That's hurricane force. The wind, actually, the strongest winds came in after the rain, and the wind took down this tree. This is Robert and Susan James here in Scott, and you're one of the lucky ones because you have power. But talk about what you did as far as evacuating and about this hackberry tree.
Well, we listened to the Weather Channel, made sure, heed all the warnings, and when they say don't stay in a mobile home, you can see the result. I mean, it's just something you want to be very cautious of. But we've been here 30 years at this location. Everything's, withstood time, but I guess that's just what happens. This tree came down on some older cars that I've had restored, and seems that they actually took the brunt of the storm, but this is basically a brand new roof on the house we just put about 8 months ago from a previous storm, and the metal roof seemed to hold up a lot better than the shingles. It didn't penetrate the roof, and we're lucky for that.
And I think I hear your tree guy across the street, so he's going to come in, and
he's on standby.
And his plan is to pull this tree up?
Yeah, he's got a plan in mind. I'm kind of glad I didn't start earlier, that you guys were here, because I couldn't figure out how he'd ever get it off of the cars. But he's got a plan to actually strap it to this other tree and stand that the tree that's fallen, stand it up again, and top it out from there.
Okay, Robert and Susan James, we appreciate it.
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Time. Glad you're not hurt. Nobody in town was hurt.
Yes, sir.
Power will get back on. We've got good weather for the cleanup in the next several days here in Scott. And once again, Delta causing more problems here than Laura did, because they had more wind, they had less rain. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel, the Weather Channel, Scott, Louisiana.
New video into the Weather Channel this afternoon now of the damage left behind in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Now, you may remember this is that high-rise office building that was heavily damaged by Laura just a few weeks ago. You can see here all of the plywood covering the broken windows. Some of that plywood blown out by Delta as the storm rolled in last night in some of the same places Laura did. So pretty amazing there. Here's what we know right now. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards says the National Guard is ready to distribute 1.5 million meals and bottles of water, 32,000 tarps, and 48,000 bags of ice. FEMA Administrator Pete Gaynor says if you've suffered storm damage, make an itemized list, take photos, keep your receipts, and call your insurance company. And Louisiana utility Entergy asks people to be patient as they restore power to hospitals and nursing homes first. In Texas, the Galveston Ferry has resumed delayed service with 4 boats running. Okay, we want to get back to Chris Bruin in Pecan Island now. Chris, the weather cooperative today, at least for the cleanup efforts.
Yeah, and again, seeing the devastation here left behind, it's very different than what we saw with Laura, but still is, going to be a process to rebuild for so many here in southern Louisiana. But if you missed out on what it looked like during the peak of the storm, our resident meteorologist Stephanie Abrams, a trooper and always does so in every event, takes you back yesterday as she witnessed it in Jennings, Louisiana.
Yeah, Army, are you kidding me, Cantori? We're getting crushed right now with the rain and the wind ripping down the street. Visibility has dropped significantly. We're watching the power line. Shows what is happening with the wind. That is by far the strongest gust we've seen so far. I anticipate to continue to see those and perhaps some stronger ones as we go over the next hour. It's about 11 miles to our south. That's it. The weather there is coming right back up to us. Look at these gusts. We're going to be in this for about the next 30 minutes, and I anticipate, I was just looking at the radar during the commercial break. Down towards Port Arthur, we've adjusted to 96 miles an hour. That weather is rotating up to us. And Port Arthur is, Lake Arthur, excuse me. Lake Arthur, which is 11 miles to our south, gusting to 96 miles an hour. The weather there is rotating right up to us. There's our strongest wind gust. Now we're feeling it. I was kind of waiting for this. I knew this was going to be coming in from Lake Arthur where they were gusting up to 96 miles an hour. I'm now at the point in the storm where the rain feels like pebbles on your face. That's how fast and how strong it is hitting any exposed skin. You can tell now, even from just last 15 minutes, things have gotten worse and they deteriorate pretty quickly. We can show you the trees that are swaying in the wind here, and down the street, the visibility is awful, just sheets of rain going down. We are experiencing the eye wall of Category 2 Hurricane Delta. Watch out, there's debris flying, watch out. All right, it's okay, it went down the other way. We're all right, you're all right. You just catch it out of the corner of your eye. So there is debris that is starting to fly.
All right, what an eventful night, and that was the scene across so many communities here. So it kind of gives you a picture of what things were looking like. I want to bring in Storm Specialist Carl Parker. Carl, let's talk about flash flooding, because this was a much quicker moving storm than some of the others like Sally. So we're not getting those 2 feet plus of rainfall totals. But how have communities done with the rain? Have there been areas that have picked up over 8 to 10 inches or more?
Yeah, no doubt about that. Radar estimates showing a pretty sizable area of more than a foot of rain. And so, yes, the storm was moving right along. But the other thing that happens here is that when you've got a hurricane, you've got heavier rainfall rates. And in general, we're seeing heavier rainfall rates. And so certainly it was quite a rainmaker as well. Chris, thank you so much. And let's take a look at the water vapor imagery and show you why this is a pretty typical situation for this time of the year. You see all of that moisture associated with the hurricane in green and yellow there, but then just off to the west, those orange colors indicating where there was drier, cooler air. And that's pretty typical for October to have that lurking. And as that came in, we actually saw a pretty rapid transition from a tropical to a non-tropical system. However, we also saw a very tight gradient of wind on the west and south side because of that temperature contrast between those two air masses. So even outside of areas where we had heavier thunderstorms, we were looking at pretty substantial wind. Storm making landfall last night at 6 p.m. as a Category 2. We have now had 4 landfalls in Louisiana for only the second time in recorded history. And here you see some of the wind gusts. For the most part, I think the sustained winds were on the order of strong tropical storm force, but we had some wind gusts that reached well up into the 80s and 90s, even 100 miles per hour in some cases, and storm surge as well. Look at that, 9 feet now the new number at Freshwater Canal Locks. And Julie, obviously a very serious surge there along the coast in some parts of Louisiana. Over to you.
And we take a quick look now as the storm moves into the northeast. It is going to be wet and gusty in places like Nashville and Atlanta. You can see the kind of morning people in Jackson, Mississippi woke up to there. The rain and the gusty winds. So more of that to come. We are looking at some wind impacts here. Wind alerts in purple does include Pine Bluff and Memphis here. So wind advisory for you. Again, just some gusty conditions throughout the evening here. Does look like we could see a 30-mile-per-hour storm still as the storm moves on through tonight into tomorrow morning. Into the 20s we go. But the rain will impact places like Nashville as well as Memphis, where it already has done so. Sunday morning in Nashville, expect a wet one coming your way from some of the, what's left over anyway, of Delta.
Wow, look at that. Did you see that? And that's just one of numerous trees that have fallen around southern Louisiana. This is from Rayne, Louisiana. That's kind of right in between Lake Charles and Lafayette. And you can see the destruction of those winds that we were enduring during the heart of Hurricane Delta. Now, really nothing more than just rain and wind pushing into the southeast that weakened quickly. But boy, are things still recovering here. And I think the thing that's so hard about it is the fact that it made landfall within 12 miles where Hurricane Laura just devastated the scene here in southwestern Louisiana. So many of these people went into this storm, although not as strong as Laura was, but didn't have the type of protection because their roofs were tarped or the landscape had already been devastated once before. You know, that really can, you know, be a saving grace sometimes, but when you remove those natural barriers by hurricanes and high wind events, it can also cause more issues down the road for the next one. And the fact they happen so close together, it's really compelling. Thankfully, the weather's now nice here in Louisiana, great for recovery efforts. And for people who did evacuate and are wondering what's it like when I come in, there are some road closures, so be mindful of that. And remember, emergency crews are still trying to assess the final pieces and get everybody to safety who needs to be rescued and kind of put back bearings on just the scope of the damage. But for the most part, I would say at least here in Acadiana and across south central Louisiana, here in Pecan Island where we are, the surge was not as high, and you can get an idea what the surge looks like. We had people taking some pictures, just the debris pile, Carl, it's high. I mean, it's as tall as some of the cars here. I mean, from our perspective, it's hard to get that bearing, but if you're on the road standing up, I mean, you're looking at 4 feet tall of grasses that got ripped out of the marsh and then pulled on shore on the land. So we know this whole area right along the shore did really see quite the surge. And while the surge was not as high as what we had in Laura, in this part of the state, the winds were more.
Yeah, we just got a report that the surge was actually as high as 9 feet west of Vermilion Bay. So it was way up there in some areas. Definitely a very scary time as that storm came on shore. Chris, thank you. And here's what's going on with the storm right now. It is certainly in a weakened state, but we do still have some issues. A couple of flash flood warnings in northern Mississippi. There is concern about severe weather as well. There you see one of those warnings along 55. Just south of Memphis, another warning near Tupelo. And here's a tornado watch that is going until 8 p.m. for eastern Alabama and also for parts of North Georgia, including the Atlanta metro. But I'll tell you, there's been a lot of cloud cover today, just a couple of breaks. The temperatures generally in the lower and middle 70s, and now rain is going to be moving in. So that is going to help to keep the instability on the lower side, Julie, and hopefully that'll help out with that tornado threat in Atlanta. Over to you.
Hope so, yeah. Well, winds gusted to more than 80 miles per hour in Jennings, Louisiana, causing widespread damage. Our own Paul Goodloe is there showing us the damage in the daylight.
Well, another day of cleanup begins here in Louisiana after yet another named system made landfall. We had Laura, Hurricane Laura, about 6 weeks ago, and then about, say, 16, 20 hours ago, we had landfall of Hurricane Delta. Now you see the aftermath, trees down everywhere, and cleanup continues. We're in Jennings, Louisiana. We're about halfway between Lake Charles, about 45 miles to the west of us, and Lafayette, about, say, 40 miles east of us here. And we were in the eye wall last night with very strong winds to do damage like this. And these are pine trees, so it's a softer wood. But yeah, the softening was really the ground here. We had at least a half a foot of rain. Some areas here are closing in on a foot of rain, so it softened the soil. So we're talking these root balls of the trees, well, it's like trying to anchor something as, you know, over 30 feet tall, over probably 40 years old, to something that is the consistency of a sponge, which this ground is right now. You see how huge the root ball is, but also look at this branch, which was impaled into the soft ground. So the winds last night for a couple of hours were gusting well over 60 miles per hour for maybe an hour or so, 75 to over 80 mile per hour wind gusts as that northern eye wall kind of slammed this area. As that passed, we had the center, kind of a dirty center, not blue sky or clear skies, or we had some light rain and clouds. And the backside, not heavy rain, but strong winds coming in from the other direction, which knocked this tree down. So we got strong winds on the front and back side of the system. And by the way, this tree was actually leaning against these power poles. This is close to this elementary school. Power crew out here making sure the lines were not live, and they weren't. They grounded those, but still, then they cut the tree down. You just see one little limb lingering here in the power lines, which still don't have energy in them yet. That's the ongoing process now, is trying to restore power to this neighborhood, as well as most of the city of Jennings, still without power right now. For the second time so far in not even 2 months, dealing with the cleanup in the aftermath of a landfalling hurricane.
Hello there.
Well, we are following severe weather, and there is now a new tornado warning in west central parts of Georgia. This is now not very far away from Columbus. We'll zoom in and get the latest on this. This is for Chattahoochee, Marion, Muskogee counties, and the cell is moving northeast at 30 miles per hour, coming up towards Route 27. A pretty strong rotation showing up here, and that is going to be moving just northwest of Cassetta and towards Eelbeck and Upatoy as well. So heads up, a possible tornado coming your way, now moving to the north and to the east. We'll have more on this coming up in just a few minutes. Chris, over to you.
All right, thanks, Carl, for that update. Again, still monitoring the latest there on the tropical threat, still bringing severe weather to parts of the south. All right, we're here in Pecan Island, where it's a great day for cleanup after nearly 24 hours now of Hurricane Delta moving ashore. I want to bring in Charles Peak, because Charles, you've been out around Lake Charles, and you came across a dog, a beautiful pup that you found to be really hungry. You were able to give it to it. Describe the situation, how you even came about finding the dog.
Well, actually, I just went with a couple of guys. There was a couple of guys fixing to launch a boat. The area was completely flooded, and I'd asked them to go out on the boat to just get some footage, and they said, well, we're fixing to go rescue this dog over here. And this dog had been chained up in the backyard through the hurricane. The floodwaters had come up into that yard, so the dog at times would have been in the floodwaters. And I went with one of the gentlemen over there, and the dog was extremely scared, tried to bite him a few times, but when I was in the military, I was a canine handler, so I had experience with dogs and worked with him in the situation, got him calmed down to know that we were there to help him, and eventually we got him onto the boat and got him out of the flood situation, and he was starving to death, so I had some hurricane rations I got for him. And Justin Michaels was able to get in touch with animal control here, and they came out and got him and are going to take good care of her. And just a sad situation. People need to rescue a dog, but because people don't think about their animals in these situations where they evacuate, you got to have something to do with their animals. You got to plan ahead for that, because at the last minute, sometimes you have to make a choice of taking your kids or a dog. But you got to have a plan for those animals.
Hey, talk about being in the right place at the right time, Charles. That really is, just the fact you had that training, you were able to calm the dog down, because I can imagine they're just, extremely scared. Have you seen other animals kind of roaming around or tied up in other parts of town? Or is this the first one that you've come across since being there?
It's the first one I've come across. As you know, Justin Michaels the night before, they had a cat rescued. Talking to the animal control, they've had quite a few of these situations that they're all but 3 of the animal control people evacuated because of the hurricane. And so there's only 3 of them here trying to work this whole situation. And but needless to say, as the lady told me with animal control, she said, this is what we're trained for. This is what we do, to go out there and help them. There was one that we could hear in a house, and she said that will be something that they will be moving to if they need to, where they sometimes will even have to break into a house to get an animal out if they need to do that.
All right, well, we appreciate the help and the bringing the attention to animals, too, especially in tropical systems. We know how many dogs get separated from their owners, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, and how there's a huge need for rescues. And Carl, it's sad to see, but what a great turnout for this pup and getting help in a timely fashion.
Yeah, that is really just heartbreaking to see. Hats off to Charles for doing that. We want to tell you about a tornado warning right now in west central Georgia, and this is in Chattahoochee, Marion, and Muskogee counties going until 5:15, not very far away from Columbus. And there you see the cell as it's moving up towards Caseta there, just a little to the west. That is the rotation showing up. That area of green and red right there is the mid-level rotation that we're seeing in the storm. And it's moving now to the north-northeast at about 30 miles per hour. That's going to take it probably just northwest of Caseta and then towards Eelbeck and Upatoy as well. So heads up, a possible tornado coming your way. We're also now seeing a little bit of rotation near Columbus, right in there, not rising to the level of a tornado warning, but many of these cells have been showing some signs of rotation for quite some time now. There is a tornado watch in effect for parts of eastern Alabama and northwest Georgia going until 8 p.m. And that also includes parts of the Atlanta metro area. A lot of cloud cover today and temperatures in the lower to middle 70s and a lot of rain coming in. But where we do see some breaks and a little more instability, there could be some stronger thunderstorms and possibly some tornadoes as well over the next couple of hours. We'll continue to keep a close eye on this.
Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
We are following what is left of Delta and an ongoing severe weather threat and a tornado warning right now in west central Georgia. Here you see the tornado warning just east of Columbus for Chattahoochee, Marion, and also for Muskogee counties. This is moving north-northeast right now at 30 miles per hour. Seeing a little more elongation in this area of rotation. It's the area of red and green right there. It's not quite as well formed as it once was, so maybe just a bit less of a threat right now. Nonetheless, we'll track it out as that moves northeast. It's near Route 27 right now, coming towards Eelbeck and also towards Upatoy as well. And then to the north, notice also another area of rotation now just northwest of Columbus, and so we'll keep our eyes on that. There is a tornado watch in effect for west central Georgia, eastern Alabama. That's going until 8 o'clock tonight. Could be a few tornadoes and some damaging wind. That also extending into parts of the Atlanta metro area. But you look at the satellite and radar picture here, there's been a lot of cloud cover today. There's a lot of rain coming in, so hopefully that is going to keep the instability on the lower side and reduce that threat somewhat. Nonetheless, there is going to be some chance that we see some tornadoes through this evening. So there you see the Torcon, 3 out of 10 in North Georgia as well as into eastern Alabama. More storms making their way up into the Atlanta metro, we think, over the next few hours here. And certainly we're going to be watching for that tornado potential as they do. Well, let's check in with meteorologist Paul Goodloe looking at some of the damage in Jennings, Louisiana.
Supposed to count the rings to find the age of a tree. I've counted these rings. I kind of lost count around 65 or so. So we're talking maybe at least 6.5 decades old. But this was cut from the taller part of this tree. So you can see is definitely maybe another 10, if not more, years of growth before it got to this part of the tree. So this was a huge tree, maybe, 80 years old, which is now a victim of Hurricane Delta. Let me show you what's going on here, because it wasn't just the winds. It was a combination of the winds and the heavy rain. This ground here is just saturated. Or if I step too close to it, it's like a water bed, because the water is very, very high. When the grass ends, nothing but water here. So that softened the root mass here. And when the winds came in, howling in from the east with the eye wall last night, it took that tree and pushed it right across the road. In fact, it was hanging on some of the power lines here for a while, with some crews knocked back down. Now this tree looks like the back of the eye wall, the back edge came through after we went through the eye. And then we had our wind shift from the west, which is coming from this direction, and knocked this tree down, which I have a little section from. But now the cleanup continues. This has been quite the year here in just Louisiana alone. This is now the 4th time we've been impacted by a named system. The most notorious so far this year was Hurricane Laura, a Category 4, which devastated Lake Charles, which, by the way, is about 45 miles to the west of us. We saw impacts here in Jennings, Louisiana, but Delta came closer. But Delta was only a Category 2 hurricane, but still substantial damage here. Power is still out across the area. And if this is what a 2 does, people here are happy they didn't have to go through a 4. That's what their neighbors to the west went to go through. But now we still have another cleanup. And what a year it's been. Delta, the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet. We went to the Greek alphabet because we exhausted the other 22 names of this year. So 26 name storm. It is our 9th hurricane. It is our 3rd major hurricane. And by the way, it is also the 10th storm now, named system, to make landfall here in the U.S. If you're with me, you can't wait till this hurricane season and this year comes to an end.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. And let's take a look at the ongoing tornado threat. A brand new tornado warning to tell you about now near Columbus, Georgia. This is now just south of 85 and along 185, Harris and Muskogee counties under warning, and that is going until 5:30. The cell is moving north about 30 miles per hour. You can see the area of rotation showing up in that green and red color. That is now just northwest of Columbus, right there. And we've got a brand new scan there as soon as I place that. So I'm going to move that a little north. That's where the rotation is right there. It is going to be coming across 185 as it moves up basically north, maybe just a little to the east of north. And that will eventually come into Hopewell. So heads up there, Champion Crossroad and also Hopewell. Possible tornado coming your way. This is now just northwest of Columbus. And there's an ongoing tornado warning right now in Chattahoochee, Marion, and Muskogee counties going until 5:15. Seeing a broader area of rotation now, but interesting when you look at the actual reflectivity, there does appear to be a little bit of a hook just northwest of Caseta. So let's just go ahead and track that out. That's moving to the north-northeast. That coming towards Eelbeck at 4:54, Upatoy at 5:09, and Ridgeway at 5:21. Possible tornado coming your way. So there is an ongoing tornado threat here. The tornado watch going until 8 p.m. for eastern Alabama and western Georgia. That also extends into the Atlanta metro. There's been a lot of cloud cover today. There's a fair amount of rain moving in. Hopefully that keeps the instability low enough that we won't see a whole lot of strong storms, but there will be a tornado threat this evening coming into Atlanta.
All right, I brought in and
We are following the ongoing severe threat from what is left of Delta. We're seeing some tornado warnings right now in west central Georgia. So let's take you on in and show you what's going on. One of these now just north of Columbus, Harris and Muskogee counties under warning, and this cell is moving north at 25 miles per hour. You see the rotation showing up very close to Smith Station. Just got a brand new scan there. I'm going to move this ever so slightly. And this is going to be coming right across 185 right now, and then moving to the north, maybe just a little east of north beyond that, coming towards Hopewell. So make sure you get to your safe place there in Hopewell. Possible tornado coming your way. And then southeast of that, another tornado warning in effect for Chattahoochee and Muskogee counties until 5:15. Here too, seeing some rotation showing up on the radar. I've not seen any debris in either of these cases. And this storm moving again, probably just a little to the east of north. And that is going to be moving towards Upatoy and perhaps Ridgeway as well. So there too, heads up, a possible tornado coming in your direction. So here we see tornado watches in eastern parts of Alabama as well as North Georgia, including the Atlanta metro area. And that is going until 8 o'clock tonight. There's been a lot of cloud cover in Atlanta. There's a lot of rain moving in as well, but we are seeing some pretty vigorous thunderstorms embedded within that rain. And we're seeing a lot of wind shear where those thunderstorms are moving up. And so even with limited instability, we might have just enough to get some rotating storms going as they come into the Atlanta metro area. So certainly that is something you want to keep in mind. 3 out of 10 on the Torcon in North Georgia. And we're going to watch this line of storms come in over the next few hours here. So be on alert as we may be looking at some tornado warnings in the Atlanta metro area. All right, we want to get out now to Chris Bruin. He's been reporting on the aftermath of the storm, Pecan Island. And Chris, at least it is, as we've said a number of times, a beautiful day there. So for those 500,000 people that are without power, a little bit more bearable because the weather is pleasant.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It helps opening up the windows, getting in the yard, trying to get at any yard debris. A lot of branches down. Of course, you got the beautiful oaks. You got one behind me, but you can see some of those large limbs did fall down, and we see that all across Lafayette. The University of Lafayette campus, gorgeous, but there's a lot of limbs down all over the place. It's going to take some time to clean up, but that's really the extent. There is some structural damage, but again, it's very spotty, especially if you're in a more exposed part of town. That was an area that maybe had some more wind issues that then took some shingles off, maybe ripped open your fence or even knocked over your shed. Power's out a lot. And we want to show you some of the scenes that we had out of Lake Charles, Louisiana. This was during the height of the storm. This is from the Civic Center. If you're familiar with Lake Charles at all, this is downtown, not far from that huge sky rise that all the windows got blown out. It became a national icon just after Hurricane Laura poured through. But look at what they were dealing with even after Laura came in. Now had to deal with winds over 90 miles per hour at times yesterday evening and yesterday night. So unbelievable. And of course, power outages, I think, are really the biggest story right now. And then the recovery efforts there in southwestern Louisiana. So we talked to David Johns. Here's what he had to say. He lived in Lafayette for 16 years and has not once lost power.
Actually, this is the first hurricane in my residence that we lost power.
And how long have you been living in Lafayette?
About 16 years.
So people in Lafayette, Carl, you know, they were hit harder with Delta than what we saw with Laura. Now, Lake Charles not the same, but either way, they're still recovering. So depending upon where you are, some of the storm was worse this go around than what we saw just several weeks ago when Hurricane Laura pushed through.
Yeah, it's been a really hard year there in Louisiana. Chris, thank you so much for your reporting today. And let's take a look at what's going on with the tornado warnings right now in west central Georgia. A couple of them. One of them is now just north of Columbus, and that in effect for Harris and Muskogee counties until 5:30. Motion here is north at 25 miles per hour. Seeing a broad rotation, but certainly a strong one. And that moving to the north, maybe just a little east of north. That is going to be coming towards Hopewell, so heads up on that. Also an ongoing tornado warning to the east for Chattahoochee and Muskogee counties. In this case, that area of rotation has really fallen apart. So I think, at least for the time being, less of a tornado threat there. So tornado watch eastern Alabama and also in North Georgia, including the Atlanta metro area. Been a lot of cloud cover today, a lot of rain coming in, but there are some vigorous storms embedded within that rain. In addition to that, we are also seeing now some instability and wind shear. Winds actually coming out of very different directions in the lowest 5,000 feet of the atmosphere. So that would be supportive of rotating storms if we get some stronger storms coming into Atlanta. We'll have much more on this coming up with Mike Bettis in just a few minutes.
Welcome into the Weather Channel's continuing coverage of Delta. We are looking at a severe weather threat spawned by what is now a tropical depression. Tornado watch across portions of Alabama and Georgia until 8 o'clock this evening. And we do have a tornado warning that's right across the Georgia line right now. And so we're going to zoom right down in and show you there are some threats here tonight. It does include an area right along 185 tonight in Harris County, including the city of Hamilton. Our warning till 5:30 this evening. Storm is basically racing off to the north this evening. A little bit of rotation detected here just to the east of I-185 and to the west of Waverly Hall. If you're around Pine Mountain, once you take shelter quickly in a safe location, lowest level of your home down on the ground level and away from doors, windows, exterior walls. An interior room is a great place to be. A basement is a great place to be if you do indeed have one. Bigger picture here, multiple lines of storms that are rolling through this evening, including a pretty good line of storms in eastern Alabama right now with torrential rain and the possibility of some tornadoes that could be spawned by that. But that eventually we think gets along say I-75 tonight. That would include Chattanooga down toward Atlanta. So these areas are going to be at risk. The low itself, where Delta sits, what's left of it, sits way back in here, but there's a lot of instability in the atmosphere out ahead of it, and that's why we're seeing that severe weather risk tonight. You can see the definitive spin there and everything shifting its way east through the night tonight, eventually getting through the Carolinas, even up into West Virginia and Virginia through the day tomorrow, and still a lot of leftover clouds and light rain for you across the Tennessee Valley and the Deep South. For Atlanta, here come your storms tonight. The real meat of the storms between 8 and 10 o'clock this evening, and then tomorrow still some lingering showers for you out there, so don't expect a sunny day to come your way tomorrow. All right, so that's a look at the severe weather threat happening for us right now. What's left of Delta? Where do we go from here? Let's bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, with some details on that.
Yeah, Mike, Delta has become a non-tropical low, post-tropical cyclone. It was a depression earlier today. So it's gaining those frontal characteristics, losing a lot of its tropical characteristics, and you see that kind of comma shape to it that's more characteristic of a frontal system. But the Weather Prediction Center is still writing public advisories on it because of the ongoing rainfall and flood threat. And I would say the area that I'm most concerned about here over the next few hours would be in the immediate northeastern quadrant of the system, where we're going to have some persistent heavy rainfall. And then, of course, you could have some local heavy rain along with the severe weather in the area Mike just talked about. So max winds are 30 miles an hour. Some areas could get some gusts to tropical storm force, especially in the heavy downpours. The pressure's come up a lot since landfall, right? 998, and it's moving northeast at 12 miles an hour near not too far from Tupelo, Mississippi, as it moves northeastward through there, and we're going near Nashville and up through into Ohio, West Virginia on Sunday, where the low pressure system will dissipate. But we got a lot of weather to deal with. Now, the good news is that we're not getting too many reports of really strong gusts, but if you measure gusts 25 miles an hour at the individual spots, in between observation sites, we could be getting gusts to 30, 35, maybe 40 miles an hour. So gusts to tropical storm force. But the main problem, in addition to the severe weather threat, is going to be the local heavy rain that could cause some flash flooding overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. It's northern Mississippi and Alabama, southwestern third of Tennessee. And then when we get into the Appalachians, we're going to have a terrain-induced problem. And that's on top of all the rain that has fallen. This is the corridor where it's really been rough. Pensacola has gotten some in that band leading into the severe weather. But right now, we don't have any flash flood warnings or flood advisories. But again, this corridor, Mike, up northeastern Mississippi into western Tennessee is going to be where the flash flooding could occur. And I'll get more concerned about that even so when after dark, when always trouble finding out how high the water is above the roads.
All right, Dr. Knapp, thanks for that. Of course, we are getting some more images in illustrating what Delta did as it roared ashore in southwestern Louisiana. In a town like Abbeville, the canopy on this gas station ripped off and flattened down to the ground. Really an example of what the winds were doing. We had wind gusts as high as 100 miles per hour with Delta. That actually happened on the west side over in Texas. Now, in Pecan Island here in Louisiana, debris not only litters the side of the road, in some cases, it covers the road here. Look at all this that was washed in. Really amazing stuff. Just nothing but mud, and now you got to get in the shovels, the big front end loaders, and get that stuff all cleared away. What a task! And then in parts of Lake Charles, standing water, stalled out cars in some instances as well, but the flooding that overtook there, and a lot of neighborhoods that took on water once again. We had incredible amounts of rain, northwards of 9 inches of rain in some spots, and the boats pulled out as well. Well, Lake Charles, located about 30 miles north of Creole, where the Delta made landfall yesterday evening. Our Justin Michaels rode out the storm in Lake Charles, joining us now live. This is just a double whammy for us, unfortunately, Justin, in Lake Charles, being hit by Laura, now 6 weeks later being hit by Delta.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Mike, talk about insult to injury. People here are going through a lot. They have been going through a lot. 44 days now, and you can see just on this one residential street, tarp after tarp after tarp, piles of debris all over the place. I can tell you just hours ago, where I'm standing right now was filled with water. This whole area was flooded out, and remnants of it are still here. The water levels are going down. That's a beautiful thing, but you can still see the roads here, though passable, are flooded just a little bit, but still there's going to be a lot of cleanup to do. There was so much cleanup to do after Laura, now 6 weeks ago, 44 days ago, and now we compound that with Delta. So I just checked the latest power outage numbers. That's not helping anything right now. We do have some great sun, and it's warm, and it's dry, but more than 500,000 customers in Louisiana are completely without power right now. That number keeps fluctuating a little bit. I checked 20 minutes ago. It was nearly 520,000 customers. Now it's down to 500,000 customers. Lots of people equal that many customers. Remember, a customer is one power account. That's your house. If you have 4 people living there, you can multiply that by 4. So it's a lot more people than it is just the number of customers, but still 500,000, 500,000, that's a lot of anything. And that's what people are dealing with right now. As far as what we went through here last night, talk about 95-mile-per-hour wind gusts here in Lake Charles, more than 9 inches of rain. We were on that western side of the storm, that now infamous western side of the storm that was much worse than what our friends to the east saw with that wind and rain that was coming through. It's not often we can say that. We always hear about that, notoriously bad eastern side, but the western side of this storm, and especially here in Lake Charles, really packed quite a punch. Now, we spoke with a gentleman earlier today who has lived through, wait for it, 4 hurricanes here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which means he's been here for quite a long time. Listen right now.
A lot of storms. Hurricane Audrey in 57 and these last 2. But Hurricane Audrey wasn't nothing to the one just passed.
As far as Laura?
For Laura, yeah. Laura's the worst one I've been in. I never would go to nothing like that.
Pecan what? Very good. So just imagine that 4 hurricanes here in Lake Charles through that man's life. Really just a tough go. And he really says that Laura, just 6 weeks ago, topped them all. People always talk about Rita. People talk about that a lot. But he says from his perspective, having lived through it and now having to live through Delta, Laura was the worst one in his lifetime. Just one man's perspective, but a valuable perspective from the history that man has seen here in Lake Charles. So definitely a tough go for so many. The cleanup is going to continue. Now 2 storms in 6 weeks. All right, let's head over to Pecan, Louisiana right now. That's where Chris Bruin filed this report.
A beautiful day after Hurricane Delta rolled ashore yesterday, mere 24 hours ago, and this was one of the spots that endured quite the night. Again, storm surge values relatively high. We're talking over 4, 5, 6 feet in some cases, and the water came well over the road. You can see the leftover standing water there, but what's really compelling is look at all the grass, the matted down grass. The majority of that was out in the water, out in that open body of water, which typically is covered in marshland. It's covered in grasses, but you can see only a few remaining piles left because of the extreme hurricane season we've had here in southern Louisiana. Hurricane Laura certainly did a number. We're not far from Creole and Cameron, only about a 30-40 minute drive, and that's where we had a landfall from both Hurricane Laura and now Hurricane Delta. And so the coastline is really getting a beating. I want to show you what this should look like. That water, it shouldn't be open as vast as it is right now. It should look more like this, like the grasses you see behind me on the way over to White Lake. So this is on the backside of Pecan Island. But over time, and hurricanes and storms will do this, they will eat and destroy some of that natural vegetation, and that makes these communities a lot more vulnerable. So think about this. The next time we're threatened with a hurricane or even a tropical storm and there's a push of water, there's less protection here for Pecan Island than what we had before, because now all those grasses have been destroyed and ruined, so that water is able to come even farther inland. And so that's just one of the things these communities are going to have to face, and preparation's key. This has been a season that has been unlike any other, especially here in Louisiana. David Johns, the one giving us the permission to be up here in his school, the hunting lodge, this bird's eye view over the area, kind of assessing the damage. Here's what he had to say about preparations.
It's been interesting. A lot of nerve-wracking times. It's been where we would prepare, and it would get detoured around, or it would go off somewhere else. Like saying, a lot of times we get built up for them and then they don't hit. Well, we had 2 of them that hit this year.
All right, so let's update you. We'll get you back with our crews in the field here in just a little bit. Want to update you again on the tornado threat that we're dealing with. Right now, it's in Alabama and in Georgia, where we have a tornado watch that extends until 8 o'clock Central Time tonight. That'll be 9 o'clock Eastern Time over into Georgia. A couple different bands of thunderstorms that we're dealing with right now, including a band that extends from, really an intense band that extends from Mississippi and near Tupelo back into central Alabama. Then a pretty intense line that's right now mostly in eastern Alabama, but now edging over into Georgia. And this is why we have tornado warnings in effect tonight. So we're going to zoom right down into Harris County. It's just outside of Pine Mountain. Our Harris County tornado warning goes until 5:30 this evening. Had a pretty good little rotation on it, but you take a look at the velocities now. There's not a lot there, maybe a little bit of rotation. There might be actually a little bit more rotation on this one back here that's along Highway 80 tonight and headed toward maybe a Waverly Hall. So just want to give you a heads up that some of these storms within these embedded lines here will produce tornadoes. So it's just a threat over the next couple of hours that you want to keep an eye on and make sure that you're home right now and you're watching us. Just every now and then you're checking in on the radar just so you know what's going on. This line right here is going to race its way over into Rome, eventually Chattanooga, and we think eventually coming into Atlanta as well, coming along I-75. So where the low sits is back here, what was once Delta. Definitive spin there, but on the front side is where you have all the instability. So everything on the east side is where the storms are firing right now. Could be a really rough night tonight in portions of South Carolina, maybe the upstate into western North Carolina where the heavy rain comes in, and then plenty of rain for us across the state of North Carolina through the morning and afternoon tomorrow. And many of you back here across the Tennessee Valley and Deep South still dealing with some rain. All right, we know that even without the threat of tornadoes, Delta has already left damage behind. And how about these trees splintered in Jennings, Louisiana? Rain. You can see the roadway there. We got hammered with heavy rain, and then we got a very intense wind, and the surge came in, and so the water came up pretty dramatically for us, and then eventually we got into the eye. So it's just intense stuff that happened for us overall here, and I got to tell you, you know, amazing to see that we had a hurricane that was 13 miles, 12, 13 miles away from where a hurricane hit just 6 weeks ago. Just stunning, really. You take a look at Atlanta and the showers and storms that are coming through for you tonight. Going to be there between, say, 8 and 10 o'clock this evening.